Hey, Friend-Tastic friends, welcome to the Friend-Tastic Library where I talk about actual books, journal books, and people books. So today I'm going to talk about actual books. We're going to go over Ready Player One, book versus movie. For those that have never read the book, if you want to read the book, there will be spoilers. Yeah, if you haven't seen the movie, you're probably fine. Yeah. There's probably going to be spoilers no matter what, but the book is very dense in the sense of spoilers because the movie is nothing like the book. So if you've watched the movie and you're thinking about reading it, maybe you should not watch this yet. If you've read the book and haven't seen the movie, you're fine. I won't spoil anything for you because the movie is nothing like the book. So we'll get started. Ready Player One. Are the movie and the book amazing? In my opinion, yes. Double yes. I love both 100%. Are they the same? Absolutely not. They're nothing alike. Not at all. So, where to start? Let's start with I saw the movie first. When did Ready Player One come out? I don't remember. But Google can tell us. So I definitely saw the movie like right after it came out. I may have even seen it in theaters. It was a 2018 film, and it was 2 hours and 20 minutes long. It had the stars of Ty Sheridan as Wade Watts. I don't really know of any like super notable people in it. Oh, Mark Rylance, I guess, is a good one. He was James Halliday. I totally forgot that TJ Miller was in it. That's funny. Who was the guy? The Simon Pegg played James Halliday's partner, Ogden Morrow. Yeah, there weren't like... I feel like for me, I didn't recognize a lot of the actors that were in it. So, anyways, the synopsis is that it's Earth, it's a sci-fi, it's in the future by a little bit. So in the book or in the movie, it's 2045, and we've gotten to a place where we all live and function in this virtual reality called the Oasis, built by James Halliday, who was born who lived through the 80s and is obsessed with 80s culture and 90s culture, and video game nerd, a computer nerd, just kind of a geek overall. He develops the Oasis because he never really got along in real life, so he created a virtual reality for himself and everybody else to enjoy called the Oasis. And eventually we get to a place where that's all we care about because you can get real jobs in the Oasis where you actually make money. And the Earth has now went to focusing more on that than anything else. So now people live as close as possible to the main Oasis, like, center, which happens to be in like Columbus, I think is the closest in the movie, Ohio of all places. It's so random. And so now like rural areas aren't that cool because you don't get good internet connection and you need internet to get into the Oasis. What else? Oh, the big thing in the movie is that there's stacks, which is where trailer parks decided that they can start stacking trailers on top of each other to have more people living closer to those city centers where they can get better internet. So, and that's where our protagonist Wade Watts lives, is in the stacks. And it's literal trailers stacked on top of each other with scaffolding, which actually, whenever they break it down in the book, makes total sense. I can see humans actually doing that and thinking of that. A lot of stuff that happens in the book really makes sense and really feels very, very graspable. I think the movie made it feel more far-fetched. Let's get into the details. Okay. So I'm going to start with the movie because it's not going to take that long. The movie is 2.5 hours, and to compare it to the book, I think that whoever decided to create this movie read like maybe the first 20 minutes and the last 10 minutes of the book and then made a movie out of it. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. It's like they kept the character names and they took the general idea that Wade Watts explains to us, because everything is from Wade Watts' point of view, completely. There really isn't a third party narrator. It's all in Wade Watts' point of view. So I think everything that he explains in the first chapter of the book is basically the movie, and then the last 10 minutes, because they do take a couple pieces from the last 10 minutes at the very, very end of the movie. But that's basically where the similarities end, is like character names and the basic overall concept that I just described to you. So whenever we see the movie, Wade Watts looks to be like an older teen. In my perspective, in the movie, Wade Watts is like probably, I feel like he's already graduated from high school because he doesn't even talk about high school in the movie. So he seems like he might be an 18 or 19-year-old man, and he looks pretty normal like we do now. He's just in shabby clothes because he lives in the Stacks, which is like the ghetto of 2045. And he is constantly logged into the Oasis. In the movie, everybody in the Oasis looks very different. It's very extravagant, cartoonesque beings of themselves, including himself. He looks absolutely nothing like his avatar. People don't even look human remotely. And he tends to reference a lot of very cliche pop culture in the movie. An example would be like they bring up a Zemeckis cube based off of Back to the Future. He actively drives a DeLorean from day one in the movie that's from Back to the Future. Yeah. What else do they reference in the movie a lot besides The Shining is a huge thing in the movie. I'm trying to think of, it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, to be honest with you. I probably watched it like a year ago. Was probably the most recent time that I watched it. Because I do truly enjoy it. Even to this day after reading the book, I still enjoy the movie for what it is. You just can't think of the movie being based off of the book. And it's still enjoyable, in my opinion. Again, I've said this before. I don't nitpick like movie effects. I'm not like a big movie effect nitpicker. I don't nitpick many things, actually. I'm very easy to please whenever it comes to media. So, yeah. Wade Watts tells you all about James Halliday and his contest to find the Easter egg in the Oasis, because whoever finds the Easter egg now owns and operates the company and the Oasis itself. We have big capitalist conglomerates that are trying to get the Easter egg and trying to run and dominate everything, which sounds super duper familiar in the world we live in now. So it all seems very realistic and attainable. And it starts off with like a race. The first clue is trying to get this race, and it says that if you win the race, then you get the key. And once you get the key, then you'll be able to unlock the gate, and yada, yada, yada. So, or I think they don't even have gates in the movie. I think they just have keys. And once you have all the keys, then you can find the egg or something like that. But eventually, Wade Watts cracks the code for the race. He wins the race. He's the first one to get the key. What do they do after the race? I don't even remember anymore. There tends to be this museum that they constantly visit with a guy named Max, and Max is kind of like the curator of the museum, but he's completely virtual and computer generated. I can't remember all of the things that they have to go through. There's like a dance somewhere in there where they're like dancing with all these people, and Halliday is trying to get with the woman that he's always loved, but his best friend ended up marrying. So Ogden Morrow married Kira, who James Halliday was always in love with, but never had the balls to tell her, because I don't really like that term. It's very gender stereotypical. He never has the guts to tell her that he loves her because he's very socially awkward. What else? They have to go through the whole Shining building, and it's all creepy. That's like a whole test. Yeah. And then the whole time there's that subplot of IOI, which is the big capitalist conglomerate, with Sorrento, Nolan Sorrento, that's trying to get the egg. So he does some very not legal things to try to get to that egg first. And eventually, again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen or read it at all whatsoever, Wade Watts ends up finding the Easter egg, and he gets to meet a computerized version of James Halliday. It looks very realistic. It's not an avatar at all, because Halliday's avatar is very old wizardy looking, and his name is Azarak. Azarak, I want to say, is a thing. Anorak? The Anorak. The Almanac. Anorak's Almanac? Azarak? I don't know. I can go along with this all day long. Either way, it's the actual James Halliday, and they're in his bedroom, and he shows him the egg, and he shows him the shut-off switch that'll just cancel the whole oasis, and he gives him the law of the land, and that's about it. To win the game, you have to beat, in the movie, to win the egg, you have to beat this video game that back in the day, you didn't actually have to be good at it. You could just find a hidden back door on the start screen, and that's where you find your third key, is in that hidden back door, because James Halliday didn't think you had to be the best. You just had to love the game. And then he goes to beat it, but IOI sets off the catalyst, which makes everything in the Oasis reset. But Wade Watts had an extra life from the quarter that Max had given him in the museum. I can't believe I'm recalling all of this right now. And so he uses his last quarter that Max gave him as his extra life, and he plays the game. If you've watched the movie and I totally said something wrong, like, please correct me in the comments. I don't mind being corrected, because I watched this a while ago, and now reading the book, I might have some facts confused. But either way, I think that's the gist of it. He gets the egg. Happy ending. Yay, yada, yada, yada. I'm pretty sure in, like, the epilogue of the movie, right? Like, as everything's ending. There was another part, too, where after he initially wins, officially, he gets shown this room full of treasures with James Halliday's wizardy avatar. I want to say it's Azarak. It's going to bug me forever now. And so, and the avatar, sorry, I'm losing my mind because I have to figure out what his avatar's name is. It's Anorak. Okay, cool. So he sees Anorak, and he's in this world of treasures, and it's like a final test, and he wants Wade Watts to, like, sign this super fancy contract. And then Wade Watts is like, no, Halliday would never want this. And that's whenever he turns into the actual James Halliday and shows him the egg, and they're in his, like, bedroom and stuff, right? Whatever. Wins the egg, all is happy. And then at the very end, he says that they shut the Oasis off every Sunday or something like that, so that people can get back into the real world and live their real lives, and we all live happily ever after, the end. Okay, so that's the movie. And now we'll get into the book, and you'll see why there's absolutely nothing in common besides the names and the concept. James Halliday was very much about winning and very much about being the best. That's why his name was on every high score ever made in the Oasis, and hardly anybody had ever beaten his high score in the Oasis. Yes, he wanted everybody to love what he loved, but to win, you had to love it so much and practice at it so much that you were the best of the best. That's the whole concept. So, in the book, Wade Watts goes all the way back to childhood and talks about how he got into the Oasis. His mom worked in the Oasis, so he got into the Oasis as a young kid. He talks about how the world got to be like that in way more depth, with war and resources depleting and people needing to move closer because they needed better internet, and how the stacks even decided to be developed and who came up with the stacks in the first place. The audiobook is read by Will Wheaton, which he is amazing at reading it, and it's also very funny at times because it ends up getting pretty meta whenever he talks about Will Wheaton being like the vice president or something like that of the Oasis, and he calls him an old geezer, but he's been running it so well or something like that. So, and then he jumps to, like, his modern day where he's like a teenager, and he's like very, he talks about being very overweight and not being healthy because the only exercise he gets is pedaling a bike to generate battery power to run his haptic gloves and visor and his his space heater in his hideout. And then he talks about high school, and he talks about how the Oasis handles high school and how you can be in school in person or in the Oasis. He started school in person and then went to the school in the Oasis because he got bullied so badly in regular public school. So he deep dives into explaining how Oasis schools work. I feel like the author really covered all the bases whenever it comes to sci-fi and answered a lot of questions that I had come up with. So I thought that was really cool. As far as sci-fi goes, he was good at like covering his tracks and answering a lot of questions. The book doesn't really talk that much about Back to the Future. He doesn't have a DeLorean from day one. He has a DeLorean later, and he hardly ever rides it. He does a bunch of changes to it and makes it look cooler than what it originally was. And then it's kind of just like it kind of ends up just being like a collector's piece because he can't take it out in public very much or people will know who he is, and he needs to stay low key. There's no Zemeckis cube. They don't talk about The Shining, like, at all. I don't think the book brings up The Shining, not one time. Yeah. What else? Okay, so then he talks about finding the egg. He finds the egg. He finds the first key. In the book, they have to find a key. The key has to unlock a gate. So there's a test to get the key. There's a test to find the key. Then you have to find the gate. Then you have to solve something to even unlock the gate. From there, then you get the clue to get the next key. Once you get the next key and you solve that test, then you have to take another test to unlock that gate. So there's 3 keys, 3 gates, and then you get the egg. That's how it works. So it's way more in depth. And I believe I want to say the book was like 14 hours. So I kind of get why they changed a lot of it to fit into the movie. But yeah, it was just so totally different. The book was so enjoyable and so engrossing that I like binged read it. I ended up staying up until like 1 a.m. on technically it would have been May 1st or April 30th. I just could not like rest until I finished it. So I just like binge listened to it. Yeah. So he talks about how he's been trying to solve this riddle for 5 years, which means that he would have started whenever he was about 12 or 13. And now all of a sudden sitting in Latin class, he cracks the code. And well, he has a hunch about how he cracked the code. And he figures out that the very first key is hidden on a school planet. He just has to get to a different side of the planet. And he brings up a lot of good points about being poor, but he finds ways around it. And then he brings up that Halliday definitely kept those things in mind because he wanted anybody to be able to find the keys and the gates and solve them. He didn't want to make it inaccessible. He just wanted to make it very difficult and make you prove yourself as a true fan and a true lover and that you were truly the best. So the first test is to beat some old school game against a bad guy, right? I can't remember all the names. It's like very wizardy Dungeons and Dragons stuff. So I have to play a game and beat him. And you have to be like really good and the best. It was called Joust. So you have to beat Joust. And it's really hard. Once you beat Joust, he got the clue of where the gate was. Then he found out where the gate was. And luckily, once you get that first key, you now have enough credits and units or whatever they call them to now have more money to easily get to where you need to go next. So now he's easily able to get to the first gate. Once you get to the first gate, you have to recite the entire War Games movie word for word in a place that they call Flicks. It was called like Snap Flicks or something like that. They ended up making it a mass produced game after everybody passed Halliday's test, and it's where you're in a virtual reality setting where you're in a movie and you have to recite the movie word for word depending on what character you are. So in War Games you happen to be Matthew Broderick most of the time, And sometimes it'll flip around if there's somebody else in a scene that has more dialogue than you. And there's all this coding to make sure that you can't cheat. IOI finds ways around all of that. But the sad thing is that this like 17-year-old boy doesn't need any cheats or help at all. He's just been so passionate and loving since the beginning that he can do it all. But still, that's not an easy thing. That you have to be like the best of the best to get through that. So once you get that gate opened, Anorak appears and gives you the next riddle so that you can find the second key. But he ends up meeting Artemis through the virtual reality and through the Oasis, and they start to fall in love, and they're talking constantly and hanging out constantly in the Oasis, and they get kind of distracted. And then they go to Ogden Morrow's birthday. Is it his birthday bash? I'm pretty sure it's his birthday bash. And then they break up because they realize they're getting distracted from finding the second key. It's been like 6 months since they found the first gate, and now they're far, like, what if IOI catches up, blah, blah, blah. So they break up, and he goes super depressed. I should go back and say that he makes it very clear that most people in the Oasis look very humanistic. They tend to keep their same features and tweak the things that you would see people tweaking on a regular basis on a social media platform. Like he made himself a little thinner, and he fixed some acne and blemishes, or he made his nose a different size that he liked better. And he brings up that H looks like just like a white dude, right? And if you recall, if you've seen the movie, then you'll recall that H's character is like a very large, not humanistic, very humanistic looking person, and it's actually a woman behind it all, and she's an African American woman. So in the book, H is just like a white dude, and nobody really knows much about him. IOI threatens to kill Wade Watts if he doesn't tell them how to find the first key, or find the second, the gate. I forget when they threaten him. I think they threaten him whenever they're looking for the... It might be whenever they're looking for the second key. Either way, they threaten him, and then they blow up the stacks. They think he's living in the stacks, but he's not. He's actually living in his hideout. So they blow it up, and he's like not super sad about it because he didn't really like his aunt and the other 15 people that lived in his trailer, but he's still upset that they did such a thing. What was it? Daito and Shoto? Those characters were in the book. They're not really developed that much till closer to the end. So anyways, him and Artemis break up, and he gets very depressed at this point. He's signed tons of contracts to be a licensable character, basically, for the Oasis. And he's making a lot of money as that, where they're using Parzival's character to promote certain things. He also, after IOI thinks that they killed him, he ends up going to the the dark web of the Oasis and changing his identity, and making himself a whole new person with like a bachelor's degree, and gets a job. So now he has like an 8-to-5 job. He starts a system of some sort where it forces him to work out, and it locks him out of the Oasis until he's burned enough calories for the day. So he finally starts to lose weight, but he showers in this like car wash style shower that like also gets rid of every hair on his body so that his haptic suit connects perfectly. So he's completely hairless, and he's incredibly pale because he hasn't left his apartment in like over 6 months, and he hasn't had hair in 6 months. So he has no eyebrows, no hair ever anywhere. He's just this like pale, hairless thing that like literally never leaves his apartment. Food gets delivered at all times that he needs to eat. He's this weird recluse, just falling in love with some chick virtually, and then they break up, and now he's just a sad, depressed recluse. So he keeps trying to find the second key, and then Artemis ends up finding the second key first, and then H finds it, and then Daito and Shoto. There's like all kinds of crazy artifacts that IOI is using to like cheat and get their way basically. And he's just starting to like totally lose his shit. And then H ends up sending him a hint because H had used some knowledge that he had of, I'm trying to think of how to word it. So Parzival and H had been best friends ever since like they started in the Oasis because they had very similar stories and they both started at a young age and they were both going to school in the Oasis. And so from H's pre-existing knowledge, he had an idea of where he would be able to find the first key after Parzival had found it. He knew it had to be on that planet that Parzival was on. So he knew where to start looking. And he also knew like what Parzival, he always kind of knew what Parzival was doing as far as research goes. And then once he found the location of the key, Parzival had told him to brush up on his jousting. And that was like a hint. So once H finds the second key, he sends Parzival an email. They've kind of stopped being friends at this point because they've gotten into fights. And they kind of started splitting ways whenever Parzival is falling in love with Artemis. It's a whole thing. You know the whole story. It's regular teen drama. And he sends him an email and he has a little hinted picture in the email of where to look. As a little hint of where to look. So Parzival finds the second key before IOI. The high five still remains Artemis H. Parzival, Daito, Shoto. They're just in a different order than for the first key because Artemis found it, then H, and then I believe Parzival was third, and then Daito, Shoto. So none of them want to join an alliance at all whatsoever. All of them want to be separate. All of them are very clear about that the whole time. Unlike in the movie where they all tend to work together. Notice how I've never once brought up any sort of race at all or The Shining or dancing with like these weird dead people. It never happens. So, yeah, it's just super weird. Let me think. So the second test is, he has to go to this arcade planet. And this is a super duper duper important thing that I wish they would have kept in the movie and they didn't. So he's on the arcade planet, but he has no idea where to look once he's on the arcade planet. And he ends up just being like pissed and depressed. And he's just starting to take a stroll through the town. And he stumbles across this old pizza place that sticks out like a sore thumb. And he goes in and he goes to the arcade section and he's looking around. And he sees this old Pac-Man arcade game that's like unplugged with an out of order sticker on it. And he decides to plug it in and take the, was it Pac-Man? Oh shit. No, it had to be Pac-Man. Yeah. So he pulls the out of order sticker off of it, he plugs it in, and he sees that the high score on it is James Halliday's, and it's 10 points away from being the best possible game you could ever play on Pac-Man. But he notices that it's already weird because those very old arcade cabinets were not supposed to go over 1 million, and this one's at 3,336,350 points. The best possible score on Pac-Man is 3,333,360 points. And so he already knows there's something a little bit off on it. And then he notices that there's a quarter on top of the cabinet, which is the old school way of saying, like, this is my quarter, I'm next in line. And so he tries to pull it off, but it doesn't come off. So he uses his own token, and he puts it in, and he starts to play. And he ends up getting the best possible score. He tells you all the hacks of how you have to get the best possible score, because it's not very apparent to a normal player of how to get the best possible score. But he knew that James Halliday was really passionate about people being, like, about him being the best and people playing him and facing him and being the best. And he knew that this wouldn't give him the Easter egg, but he figured it would give him something that would be cool. Maybe an artifact, because he talked a lot about doing challenges and quests to get artifacts or getting a lot of money or other armor or any type of winnings. He thought this would be a really cool one because clearly no one else had ever tried it. The out of order sign was still on it. It was unplugged. That quarter on top was unmoved, and no other scores were on that screen besides James Halliday. So he figured he was the first one to ever do this, and maybe he would find a one-of-a-kind artifact. So he plays, he wins, and the quarter falls off, and it's in his inventory now. He has no idea what it does or what it's for. He's not... the game doesn't allow him to do any analyses on it. The author talks... well, I guess I should say Wade Watts talks a lot about the meta-ness of this whole ordeal where it's... You're in a video game playing video games, and it's like you're playing a game... the whole hunt for the egg is where you're doing tests, you're playing games and taking tests within a much larger game that is finding the Easter egg, and all of that is in this giant virtual reality game that is the Oasis, that is in real life. So it's this very much like Russian nesting doll situation within the book, and it has so many layers, and the author just talks about that so many times, and I love it so much. The writing was so good, in my opinion. It was one of the coolest sci-fi novels I've ever read because I feel like since it was through the eyes of this teenage / almost adult boy man, it was just it felt like it was explained so well and in a way that was so relatable. And I think what the movie lacked too was like the lack of representation. He talks about how James Halliday coded to think of people that were disabled, and James Halliday coded it in ways for children to go to school but still be safe. And there's ways to there's tons of coding for people to express whatever gender identity they want and whatever sexual identity they want. He talks about Wade Watts goes through the struggles of deciding what's cheating and what's not, and what's virginity and what's not, and they discuss how bad the Oasis or virtual reality can be whenever it comes to giant capitalist conglomerates. And he talks about needing politics in such a large thing that people are involved in, and you have to vote for a real world United States president, and then you have to vote for this worldwide Oasis conglomerate president and vice president and so on and so forth, and how as a long-forgotten poor child, he doesn't care about U.S. elections because the U.S. has never cared about him. So he only cares about Oasis elections because the Oasis is the only place that feels real to him. And he talks about the disconnect between feeling like everything is real in virtual reality, but then realizing none of it is real whenever you turn everything off and go to bed at night. It's just so much more complex than what the movie made it seem. I feel like it's just missing out on so much. And I think the catalyst is whenever, no pun intended, I think the catalyst to realizing that is whenever I got to that Pac-Man scene. Because while he's focused in playing Pac-Man, that's whenever he goes into like the meta-ness of this life that he's living. And how he's just this hairless, pale, depressed recluse that was born into a world that he didn't ask for, and that's born into this world of shit-tier politics and poverty run by capitalist greedy assholes, and everything's ending and we're all gonna die, and nothing about this is cool except for this Oasis, and that's all he can care about, and it's not even real. And yeah, just like I got goosebumps a lot listening to this book. So that was probably my favorite part. He eventually finds the second key. He has a hard time finding the second gate, and it ends up that IOI is the first one to find the second gate. And that's because they have a whole team behind them figuring things out. But the cool thing is it shows him finding pieces that they never thought to find, where he has to play a Rush song, or he doesn't have to play a Rush song, he just has to take the guitar somewhere to get the key, I believe, or the gate. I can't remember which one. but instead of just giving the guitar over to Win, he plays the Rush song, and then it displays a message to him about 3 being a magic number or something like that. And he assumes that IOI's team wouldn't have done that, so they probably didn't get that hidden message. Yeah. And so then they end up being the first ones, which means they have the first chance to the 3rd key. And once they have the 3rd key, they're going to be the first ones that get to the 3rd gate. So now they start looking more seriously into maybe working together, because they don't want IOI to win. It's more about making sure IOI loses than it is them working together. IOI ends up killing Daito. In real life, they kill him, and you find out that Daito and Shoto are not actual brothers. They have just been together in the Oasis for so long that they felt like brothers. Again, these are all kids that have like grown up in the Oasis, basically. Like, reality isn't reality to them. It hasn't been doing them any favors. The Oasis is their reality. So, Daito dies, and that really fucks up Shoto, and it's just a mess. So then, basically what happens is everyone gets to the 3rd key eventually, and IOI has no idea how to open the first gate. So everybody's at a standstill because IOI has the gate completely shielded off in like a force field bubble with some crazy artifact that can't be undone. They did something similar in the movie. And Wade decides to give himself up to he fakes an outstanding balance with IOI. He has this whole scheme to infiltrate it from the inside. He takes like 8 days to infiltrate it, put in all these backdoor things to take the shield down, as well as get as much data as he can on a thumb drive to use against them later to get IOI taken down as a whole. And he already knows how to open the 3rd gate. He knows that you need 3 keys, so he's assuming that 3 crystal keys need to be used to open the gate, because Halliday would want people to work together at some point, because you can't do anything by yourself type deal. Yada, yada, yada. And so him and H and Artemis open up the 3rd gate. At some point, Ogden Morrow helps them by allowing them to come to his home in Oregon as like a safe house and get like the best gear and the best internet connection so that they can do this. And so they go in to take everything down. Everybody shows up, just like in the movie where like all Oasis people ever show up either to watch the show or to fight. And he gets to the gate, and IOI sets the catalyst off. But in the book, it doesn't reset the whole Oasis. It resets everything in that sector. So it's not like everyone dies, but it's like I think he said like half of the Oasis avatars are killed because they were all in that sector watching or fighting. But instead of dying, Wade doesn't die. It says, "Congratulations, you have an extra life." And he finds out that quarter from Pac-Man is his extra life. But he still can't get to the gate. He has to find a way to get to the gate. So he has to kind of deal with the artifacts around him, because he states that artifacts can't be destroyed. They're one-of-a-kind items. They can only be auctioned or traded. They're never destroyed or go away. So he eventually gets up to that gate, and they tell him that IOI is in a whole nother sector, and they're on their way there now that they've reset that sector to try their hand at it again. And now they know how to get in because they watched him use the 3 keys. Yada, yada, yada. There's multiple tests this time. There's not just one test to the Easter egg. You now have to do 3 things. So he had to like play a video game, and then he had to do another one of those like flicks where he played characters in a movie, and he had to do Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And then he realizes from his friends that this is a live feed, and the whole Oasis world is watching this all happen. And they're also able to see all the other IOI people playing as well. And so he can tell that, what's his name? Serrano is Nolan, is right like 10 minutes behind him. And eventually they get to a room. And in the room is like every computer and video game thing ever made, ever since like the first computer all the way up to the Oasis. And you have to know the password to get in. He figures out the password, which is linked to Kira, which deals with Kira's avatar name. And what I liked about the book was that there really wasn't much centered around Kira like it was in the movie. It wasn't this big thing that everybody knew that James Halliday was secretly in love with her. Only Ogden knew that. And Kira knew that. Oh, I don't even think Kira knew it. I think he just said that he knew it, and it always hurt Halliday to know that he could never have her. It wasn't this like huge drama filled thing that they made the movie out to be, or made it out to be in the movie. But yeah. So he figures that out, and then from there he knows exactly which game he wants to put into the Atari, and he plays Adventure. And that's where he did something similar to the movie, where he had to take like a dot to the beginning or something like that to get the key. But again, it wasn't as simple as just like finding the secret back door or whatever. So I think in one of the games too, he had to die on purpose because of an old glitch that would give you more lives or something like that. It was all kinds of, the ending was so tense. So tense. And yeah, eventually he wins. And then it's kind of similar to those last couple minutes of the movie where he sees James Halliday, the real James Halliday. No avatar. There is no weird test about him signing some paperwork for the Oasis and whatnot. There's no final test like that. It's just James Halliday talking to him. But it's not, that part wasn't like live feeded like the rest of it was, and James Halliday tells him to make sure that he doesn't forget what reality is and all this other stuff. And it's just a really sweet ending. He doesn't say anything about shutting the Oasis off at all. I think he says he takes like a 9-day break or something like that. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Whenever he holds the egg in his hand for the first time, it's like, it like gives you goosebumps because you're so invested in this story. And it's just kind of crazy that the movie was absolutely nothing like it. Yeah. 10 out of 10 recommend the book and the movie for sure. Just know that they're two completely different things that just happen to have similar characters and concepts. Like literally there's no similarities. I wish there were more, but there's not. I'll actually probably watch Ready Player One tonight or tomorrow just because I do enjoy it. But yeah. That's it. I'm sorry this one was longer than usual, but I was really passionate about this book and I really wanted everybody to see how different everything was from book to movie. And I really, really think you should just read the book. Like, even if you've already seen the movie and you've already watched this and everything is spoiled for you, I think you should read the book because being submerged into that world is so amazing. As I was listening to it, I felt like this is where we as a people are already headed because of like virtual reality headsets that are already a thing. Facebook's trying to do their whole metaverse thing. There's already all of this virtual space with NFTs. There's already virtual land. There's already virtual currency. I feel like we're watching it start right now, and 2045 just feels like such a realistic year for all of this to actually happen. So I think reading the book is kind of like a foreshadowing into our future if we keep going where we're going. And I think it's really cool to see that maybe it's not all bad. Like maybe there's bad stuff about it, but maybe it's not as bad as we think it is. It's just new to us. I think it's cool to see it through a kid's perspective instead of an adult's perspective. You know, the book would have been very, very different if like a 35-year-old man was or a 35-year-old woman was the narrator, and we heard their viewpoint on the Oasis. Oh, I guess I should have brought up, it's revealed that H is an African American woman, and she's gay, and she plays herself as a white man because that's what her mom had done. Her mom got a job in the Oasis as a white man whenever she couldn't get a job as an African American woman in the real world. And she knew very quickly that she was treated very differently for being a white man. And so she lied about her daughter's race and gender whenever she first signed her up for the school district in the Oasis as a kid. And H has just always played a white male since then. So he looked very humanistic like a lot of people did. And he just looked like a white male. And it's funny that after finding that out at the very, at the last couple chapters of the book, Wade goes back and forth with saying he and she, but it just seems so like normal and fluid, and I loved that about it. It makes you realize that like pronouns aren't hard to understand or get through. You just have to find out what that person prefers and just go with it. Yeah, I thought there was a lot of cool representation in it. I already started the second book because I didn't want the story to end, and the second book has already started pretty strong for me. I'm really liking it. I'm really liking where they went with it. As of what's coming next, I'm also reading The Hobbit, so I can do the Hobbit movie versus book. Really enjoying it so far. I'm about 30% through right now. By the time this actually posts, I'll probably be done with it. If you're interested in the Hobbit audiobook, 10 out of 10 recommend Andy Serkis's narrated version, not Rob Inglis. No offense to Rob Inglis. I know he was amazing for his time, but Andy Serkis is a far superior narrator in my opinion. What else? As far as like what I'm watching, listening, and reading, you know, I'm reading The Hobbit right now. Music-wise, me and my kids have been doing dance parties to all of the cool classic dance songs like the Macarena and the Cha-Cha Slide, so that plays a lot in my house. I'm also really stuck on Griftwood by Ghost. Love that band so much. And then as far as watching, I am like incredibly invested in the Depp versus Heard trials. No shame about it. I've been invested since day 8, where I literally log into YouTube every day and watch the live stream almost daily. And I watch as much as possible. So that's that. Yeah, if you are like a total hater of it, that's cool. I don't care. I don't care whose side you're on. To me, it's like actual reality television. Like it is the truest form of reality television that we have available to us right now. And I love every minute of it. I've also just learned so much about random stuff. Like I learned about Disney today, and I learned some cool facts about Disney, and you learn how lawyering works and how court works. Like for those of us that have never been to court ourselves, it's cool to see how things proceed and learn the lingo. So yeah, truly invested and committed to knowing what happens. So I'll probably keep up with that. Yeah. If you have any other suggestions for books versus movies, let me know in the comments. I have a good list going. And I always have hopes and dreams of doing certain books in a certain order, but at the end of the day, I don't want to have to buy all the books. So I end up waiting for them to become available at my library, which is why I really wanted to do Jurassic Park, like right now, but I don't want to buy it right now. So I ended up just looking through my library app and finding The Hobbit, I own the Hobbit audiobook by Rob Inglis and could never get into it because I thought he was so boring and he would put me to sleep. No offense, Rob Inglis, I love you so much. And, or Rob Inglis fans, I love you all too. But then at my library, I saw the Andy Serkis version. So I'm really loving that right now. If you want to know what I'm reading in real time all the time, you can follow me on Goodreads. It's in the description below. I also have a Patreon you can join. I also have my podcast on Fridays still, and I'll be doing a lot more of these. People tend to like them, and people are giving me a lot of feedback. People are giving me a lot of book versus movies they want me to do. So I'm very excited about all of it. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you all for watching. I'm sorry this took so long. I love you so much. Okay, bye.